Well, in a nutshell, it should be, of course, the core must be nation-state and the nation-state understanding, namely the three powers who have not yet used their powers to project peace in a meaningful way, but rather following designs, strategic designs, which they could not live up to their own account. These are Turkey, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. Now, we know that these three important powers who were unable, for instance, in Syria, to decide the fate of the Syrians the way they would have liked, but I mean, these powers would have liked, but they're strong enough to spoil and to stop any other schemes of any power intervening in the region. At the same time, we know that not only spoiling, but also that there's a kind of a checkmate situation between the three there. Nobody can really dominate. So from this point onwards, you would say they should go for an agreement and design what the region and how the region should look like, starting with Syria as an example. Yesterday we heard a lot about European analogies. I would suggest another much more tempting and a much more meaningful analogy, and that is the Peace of Amasya, which gave almost a century peace between the rivaling powers, Iran and the Ottoman Empire in 1555. Once you have this spirit again, namely in the sense of we accept you and there are clear limits where we interfere and where our interests are, you can easily sort out all the other issues, be they ideological, religious, or else. Now, who should not be in such a security structure? Well, there are two groups basically declared enemy by everybody. These are Al-Qaeda and the so-called Islamic State. I call it the so-called Islamic State. They call themselves Islamic. So, fine. After the military defeat of them, one cannot ignore it means a dismantlement of their ideology and their arms, but what is important is to address the root causes of the frustrated Sunni Arab populations. You simply cannot ignore, you cannot go back to the days in Syria when the Assad regime was stable, or in Iraq before Maliki came to power, that Iraq still has its own Arab Sunni identity alongside to his Shiite identity. So at one point you have to address this. Other so-called proxies or non-state actors like Hezbollah are less a problem. Why are they less a problem? Because Hezbollah is under a clear chain of command. You can negotiate with Tehran, and in the course of a potential Syrian solution, Hezbollah will do what they can do best: go back to Lebanon and secure their interests. They are part of a solution, but unless the power behind them allows them to spoil something, they are not the risk. Now this comes to a very big question, or actually the core question, which makes things about 10 times more complicated, and that is what I would call the Kurdish question. I don't even dare to formulate it because, and by the way, the views are mine, not my government's, but it is basically the one attempt to have a stabilization and a strengthening of the Kurdistan region as a quasi-state entity. Whatever an understanding of the three big countries will be, there will be something where the interests and the cooperation of Kurdistan will be taken into account. This is interesting insofar because at the same time you deal with Iraq, but you also have to deal with Kurdistan separately, whether one likes it or not. And from a state-centric perspective, of course, this is a no-go, but it is a reality already on the ground which is not to be ignored. There is, however, another Kurdish reality and that is what I call the PKK complex. It's not only one organization with a clear chain of command, although that exists too, but it's a variety of groups which exploited strategic weaknesses in some countries better, in some countries less. And it was until now definitely impossible to militarily defeat them. For whatever reason, it was not possible. They were always coming back. They were defeated, they were pushed in a corner, but they were always coming back. And one cannot ignore it. And there is a dangerous, naive thinking to use the Kurdistan regional government's power and prestige among Kurds, to use them simply as a tool to fight other Kurds. These days of Kurds fighting Kurds are over. There will be no Brakoshi any longer. There will be no more Kurds fighting Kurds any longer. There will be perhaps clashes, but then a full-fledged attack, I doubt it. For two reasons. One is, again, whether we like it or not, the American intervention in Syria and their open support of the YPG, even if they say the YPG has nothing to do with the PKK, which is wrong, has elevated the YPG from an ignorable and marginal force to a player in Syria. A player so strong that they even dared and were capable to project, again, we're talking about a guerrilla organization, but they were able to project power towards Sinjar Mountains and even in some time towards Turkey, and threatening Turkey's security interests dramatically. Now, how to deal with that? Fact is that the only way to go is to use not the KRG and not to cooperate with the KRG in the rude, brutal security manner against the YPG, but to use its diplomatic skills and to help to negotiate a solution in the framework of the Syrian solution and make sure that YPG, on the diplomatic way, remains a part of the Syrian problem and does not try and start to give the whole organization of the PKK the backbone to legitimately claim, entre guillemets, to be an alternative representation and an alternative speaks organization for all Kurds worldwide. I think at this point we can see a clear coincidence of interest of the big nation states, Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, especially Iran and Turkey, who have already a good working relations with the KRG, often complicated relations, but the working relations, and to the detriment of the whole organization of the PKK. I think this convergence of interest on the Kurdish issue will help clarify things and allow a beneficial cooperation and can become the nucleus or the only core mechanism for both stabilizing the Kurdish, rearranging the relationship between the Kurds and the nation states, and stabilizing the region. Of course, the way how to wait in Saudi Arabia there depends entirely on the Iranian-Saudi relationship, and here again I think it is the issue of Turkey, most importantly, to be able to work on such a triple alliance, including Kurdistan.